there are people on live stream. Hello, people on live streams. Shabbat shalom to you. And let's see. Is that Maya, MJ? Yes, it's Maya. Shabbat shalom, Maya. Shabbat shalom, Rebecca. Okay. And it is 9:01. So the Yeke in me is going to start. Shabbat shalom. Good morning. We're going to look at Parashat Emor, which is a wacky Torah portion, and I'm very happy to work with you on it because it has some strange things, and I'd love to brainstorm with you. But first, let's have announcements. Cindy, do you have announcement?
Sisterhood is having a tour and a lunch at the Getty on Thursday, but it's sold out before we even publicized it. So I know Lynn and Doris are coming.
I don't think I can make it, Cindy. I think I opted out, but I'm pretty.
But let Marilyn know so she could replace you.
Okay.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Doris.
Yeah, I just wanted to announce that my beautiful grandson, Noah, is going to be named at the temple next Friday night, and anybody is welcome to come and meet my family. We'll all be there.
Oh,
lovely.
Mazel tov.
Thank you.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
Any other announcement or check-in? Yes, Jim, please.
Tonight, the Film Society is going to discuss a film called 99 Homes.
Yep.
Garfield, who was in Tick, Tick, Boom. It's really a film about what would you do to support your family if you had to, and how far would you go to do so? And would you even break the law if you were forced to do that or seduced into doing that because it was such a good life that you created? It's a film, modest film, raises a lot of very important questions about honesty, morality, capitalism, our society. We'll have a great discussion. It was made by the man who did The Man Who Sold His Skin. And we all love that film. And this is equally challenging, but it's a much more modest film. But plenty to talk about tonight at 7:30. And you can just go to the Temple Bulletin or reach out to me, and we'll send you a link so you can hook up. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other announcements? No?
I just want to say it's so lovely to see Barbara Levin. We haven't seen her for a while.
Right. Hi, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Barbara.
Oh, Barbara, hi.
Hi.
Hi. And I see people joined us since we started. Hello, Shabbat Shalom, Donna and Roy and anyone else. My screen doesn't show everybody. So later on, when we start talking, please, you may need to use the electronic hand so I can see you better or help me out. Any check-in, special things, something wonderful in your family, something challenging? No? All right. Good. So let's start with the bracha.
Baruch
Atah
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעשות בדברי Torah. Amen.
Amen. So this week's Torah portion is called Emor, and it's somewhat of a potpourri. It starts with laws about priests, and especially focusing on whom priests may or may not marry. And one of the things I want to, if we have time, I'd like to take a look at it, because it raises questions as to should leaders have different rules from the rest of society? And if so, what should they be? And it's really interesting what they choose to do with the priests. They focus on marriage laws, whom the priest can marry and whom the priest cannot marry. So if we have time, we'll come back to that. That's chapter 21.
21, where is it? Where are we?
We're not looking at it yet. I'll tell you where we're going to go. We're going to go to chapter 24. It's in the Plow 829. And in the Torah Women Commentary, it is at 738 following. That's what we're going to concentrate on. But I wanted to give us an overview of what goes on in this Torah portion. And the next big thing is it lists all the holidays. So we have the catalog from Shabbat to Pesach all the way to Sukkot. And then comes a story. There are only 2 stories in the book of Leviticus. One of them we looked at. What story was that? Does anyone remember? Any story in, yes, David.
Is it the story of Aaron's sons?
Yes. And what's their names?
Now you've got me. But I know what they do, which is they bring alien fire and are immediately disposed of because they have transgressed.
Right. And we're not quite sure what they did wrong, do we? I mean, there are all kinds of theories, and we talked about it and reacted to it. What's their name? Donna, you have your hand.
Nadav and Avihu.
Yeah, Nadav and Avihu, a very puzzling story, happens on the grand day of celebration, and they bring offering, and something about it is wrong, and they get zapped and incinerated, actually. And then Moses doesn't seem to be very good at being a pastor. And he says, this is what God said, in my, those near to me, I will be sanctified. And we spend time trying to figure out what did they do wrong? And we left with more questions than answers. Well, there's a second story, and that's the one we're going to look at. And it's also a very strange story. And we will probably be left with more questions than answers, but we'll give it a try. Before we look at the story is referred to as a blasphemer, someone who has blasphemed. And we're going to want to see what did he do that was so terrible. But since there are only those 2 stories, we understand why the first one is in, but it's less clear why this one is in. So one of the questions people wonder about, why are we told this story? What are they trying to tell us? And you might say, well, they tell us because it happened, right? But lots of things happen and we don't read about them. So why is this story there? Another thing we're going to be puzzled by is what actually happened and what's so terrible about it. The third thing we'll wonder about, you see we have a long agenda, is since there is a whole group of laws that are attached to the story, what do these laws have to do with the story? Why are these laws tagged on to this story? And finally, what is the connection between this story and the story of Nadav and Avihu? Because it's hard not to think about those 2 stories as sort of a frame and kind of in relation to each other. And I would love for us to explore that, because scholars from time immemorial have been wrestling with that, and there are no definitive answers. but there are interesting ideas in that parallel or contrast between the only two stories in a biblical book. So let's start by reading the story, and we'll read it in parts. And I can use someone to read. We are on Deuteronomy 24. Let me put it in the chat.
Deuteronomy 24.
I'm sorry, Leviticus 24, Leviticus 24,
Leviticus 24.
10 to 23. Cloud is, I have to copy it, 8 to 9. Torah, a women commentary, it is 738. Following.
23. Is it 23 that we're starting with, or 24?
We are starting with 24,
24.
10 to 23, but we're going to start reading 24, 10 to 13, 10 to 12. Can I get a reader?
Here I can read.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Now an Israelite woman's son, whose father was an Egyptian, went out among the people of Israel, and the Israelite woman's son and a man of Israel quarreled in the camp. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name and cursed, and they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Sheolamith, the daughter of Debri of the tribe of Dan, and they put him in custody till the will of the Lord should be declared to them.
Good. Now, what translation did you read? What book do you have?
One that was left by my ex-husband who was not Jewish.
That actually happens to be the Oxford Annotated. That's a very, very good translation of this passage. Now, the rest of the group, if you're reading Plaut or the Woman Commentary, you have a slightly different translation. Let's get one, because what Rebecca read is the accurate translation. It talks about the Israelite woman and the son of the Israelite woman. Now let's see what Plaut does with it. David, you wanted to read, do you have Plaut or the Jewish Women Commentary?
What chapter and verse is this?
24:10.
12, 10 to 12.
Oh, 10 through 12. Oh, should
On
I,
24, is it 24, 10 to 12?
Yes.
should I read it? Yeah. And the son of an Israelite woman, and he was a son of an Egyptian man, went out among the children of Israel, and the son of the Israelite woman fought with an Israelite man in the camp. And the son of the Israelite woman profaned the name and cursed. And they brought him to Moses, and his mother's name was Shelomoth, daughter of Debri of the tribe of Dan. And they left him under watch to determine it for them by the Lord's word.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, I read the wrong translation also.
yeah, I was going to say,
I have any translation
something
you want.
else. So let me highlight what we are looking at. Let's look at verse 10. And the fight broke out in the camp between that half Israelite and a certain Israelite men. Is that what most of you have?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Rebecca and David read this part differently. Will you read it again? The second half of verse 10. And a fight broke out.
Is that, I'm going to read it.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
And the Israelite woman's son and a man of Israel quarreled in the camp. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name and cursed.
Okay. See, in the plot, they refer to the half Israelite. That's not in the Hebrew. In the Hebrew, it's always the Israelite woman's son.
Right.
Okay? So that's the first thing I want us to look at.
My
So-
translation doesn't even say anything about blasphemy.
Okay, what does it say? Which translation?
It's the Schottenstein interlinear.
What does it say?
It says that the son explicitly pronounced the name of the Israelite woman, the name, and cursed, and that's why they brought him to Moses.
Okay. Now, what you have is the more precise translation.
Right.
He
That's what
pronounced the name and cursed. So here are some of the things. We have an Israelite woman, right? An Egyptian man, their son gets into a fight with another Israelite in the Israelite camp. And something happened about pronouncing God's name, which some translations describe as blasphemy, and Steve's translation tells us he pronounced the name and cursed. Okay, so that's the story. And they pretty much put him in detention because they didn't know what to do. What questions does this raise in your mind? What do you find interesting, challenging, puzzling, surprising? Anything? I see Merle, and then I see Donna, and then I see Rebecca, and I saw another, and then I see Steve. Okay, Merle, Donna.
No, nowhere does it say what he said that was wrong.
We don't know what he said.
That's the challenging part for me, is what did he say that he got in so much trouble?
That's right. What did he say? It's something about pronouncing God's name and cursing. So the first question is, what did he do? Good. Who was next? Donna.
I'm just curious why it was necessary to mention that his mother is Israelite and his father is an Egyptian. Why does that matter for us to know?
Right. That's another question. How does that change the issue? If this had been to Israelites, would we have the story? Or if it were to Egyptians, would we have the story? So that's another question. More questions. Yeah, Steve and then Rebecca on my screen, and then I see Brad and Ray.
Well, I have like at least two questions. One of them is, where is the Egyptian father? And if he's in the Israelite camp, is he part of our community, or is he something different? The other thing is, why does this come about? Presumably, this child has been living with his mother in the Israelite camp with all of these people. Is the Israelite he fights with part of the community? Or again, is this someone who was from somewhere else and came into this particular Israelite camp, and that's what created the friction? Because maybe he reacted differently because this child or the son wasn't fully Israeli. So those are my questions.
Yeah, these are all questions that this weird story raises for us. There's so much going on, and we're getting the tip of the iceberg. Rebecca?
I was thinking the same as Donna, that seems prejudicial that they would be specifying Egyptian and Israelite. And then my other question was, why did they also point out that they were from the tribe of Dan? Wasn't Dan and Judah part of the southern tribes that were the last to survive? Is there something to do with the fact that the tribe of Dan went into extinction almost before the exile?
Actually, yeah, why Dan is really important. We will want to come back to that, but let me just clarify. Dan is actually no longer a southern tribe. Dan, well, it starts on the coast and then it moves to the north. So eventually it's a northern tribe. But it's a small tribe. We don't have many stories. We only have one story about Dan, and that's about the judge who comes from Dan, and that's Samson. And Samson is a peculiar judge, if you notice. He doesn't really do very much, except gets into trouble. And he does more when he dies, commits sort of suicide. Than he did in his lifetime. So Dan is weird. And then we learned that the whole tribe picks up and moves from the coast all the way up north. So we have Tel Dan. And Tel Dan becomes later on an important shrine in the north. But it's itself a small tribe. But yeah, why do we need to know that? And we don't learn about the Israelite guy. What tribe did he come from? So that's another question. Brad?
Yeah. You know, in verse 10, we learn about the father and the mother of the boy. But in verse 11, it's only the mother who's mentioned, the Israelite woman. And I wonder if there isn't some kind of change in emphasis, why the Egyptian father is dropped in verse 11.
Good. Yeah, Shlomit is the only woman in Leviticus named. In fact, she's the only person out of 6 people. Only 6 people who are named in the book of Leviticus. There's Moses, 1, Aaron, 2, no, 6, 8. Nadav, Avihu, Eliezer, and Itamar, the 4 sons of Aaron, and then Shlomit. So only Moses, Aaron, and their family, and Shlomit are named in the whole book of Leviticus. Why is she named? And why not the father? Good. Ray.
Thank you, Tamara. There is almost nothing in these verses that does not trouble me. And even if we look aside for a moment of the whole framing situation we've been discussing of the half Israelite and the Israelite and all of that, even if we ignore that momentarily, every step of how, at least in the Plaut translation, the process is described is opaque and subjugating to my mind and authoritarian to my mind and unattributed. So I'm looking at 2 places where they fail to attribute the agents of this act. So in verse 11, and he was brought to Moses. In the passive voice, we do not see who brought him to Moses. Verse 12, and he was placed in custody. Again, who places him in custody? Who determines it's appropriate to place him in custody? Who is responsible for this act of justice? The text appears to be silent. And finally, culminating in that verse 12, which is charged with self-righteousness, until the decision of the eternal should be made clear to them. And if we think just for a moment about this, what is the process here? It seems they have imprisoned a man, and somebody, we know not who, is doing this under the premise that, well, this is until we know what to do next, because the eternal will take the next step. the ball is in the Eternal's court now. And who knows if God will speak in any recognizable way, or any way that everyone can indeed agree is the same thing that they think they're hearing God say. Who knows if and when it will happen? And if it doesn't happen, does that mean that this man is imprisoned in limbo for all the days of his life? Because, well, we haven't heard from the Eternal yet. We haven't heard the judgment yet. So there seems nothing that is a remotely objective or respectful kind of due process here, and there are no parties responsible.
Very interesting. I hadn't thought about it. Let me push back on that. And then as we read further, some of that will be addressed, but it doesn't obviate the problem. Yeah, we don't know. So let's imagine the scene. People are walking around doing their thing, and suddenly there's a fight. So people gather and watch the fight. And one is an Israelite, and one is a son of an Israelite woman and an Egyptian man. And it's a physical sort of fight. And one of them loses his cool and says something. And all the people around it are saying, whoops, what has happened here? So they don't know what to do. So I'm more inclined to read them sympathetically. They saw someone curse God, and they're not sure what do you do when someone curses God? And so they don't immediately jump to conclusion. They put him in detention. So we assume it's the bystanders who are now taking this, breaking up the fight, taking this hot-headed son and placing him in custody in the hope that a message from God will come. Presumably, Moses will step in and ask God. I think that's assumed. So I don't imagine a long-term house arrest or any arrest. It's more a community is baffled by situations that didn't happen before. And bringing back to Dana's point, if this had been two Israelites, would that be one situation? Or is the identity and the genealogy germane to why they don't know what to do? But they clearly don't know what to do. And there are 4 cases in the Bible where the community in the Torah, 4 cases in the Torah where situation comes up and people don't know what to do. One of them is when a man collects wood on the Shabbat, and they're not sure what they should do with that. One is when some people are not pure enough, they can't get themselves ready for Passover. One of them is our story. And the 4th one is one of my favorite, and that's the story of Tzlofchad's daughters, when 5 daughters who did not have brothers go to the community and say, hey, why should we be excluded just because our father died? Give us a share in our with our brothers. Give us a share of the land with our brothers. And Moses doesn't know what to do. So Moses goes to God and brings their case before God. And this is a similar situation. They're not sure what to do. But what's really interesting in Tzlofchad's daughter, and since I got you all here, I can't resist sharing this because it's one of these wonderful moments in the Torah where God says, Ken, not Tzlofchad Dovrot. Yes, these daughters are right, and therefore you should give them inheritance with their brothers. And moreover, it should be a law for all generations that if there is no son, the property, the inheritance go to the daughters. And only if there are no daughters, it goes to male relatives, blah, 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 blah. Which means that in the Torah, women can inherit. when there are no sons. And therefore, Jane Austen couldn't have written her books. And therefore, Downton Abbey couldn't have its drama, because in biblical time, biblical women could inherit, and it took the British society so many millennia to catch up. So this is one of those, and they don't know what to do. So they turn to God. I see Steve and Howard.
I'm a little confused about why they didn't know what to do. I mean, I realize the Torah is not 100% chronological, but we already have the 10 Commandments in Exodus and taking God's name in vain. And presumably throughout these wanderings, the issues of breaking those rules have been dealt with many, many, many times.
Good. And we'll come back to that in a minute. Howard?
I think maybe some of the confusion comes from the plot translation using the passive tense, they were brought, whereas I think to me, it looks like it's fairly clear from what's actually written there in the text that the people brought the wrongdoers and then to Moses and waited for Moses to hear from God what to do. So it was pretty clear what was going on.
Right. I think the point was being made that it doesn't quite say it that way, although I think that is what it means, that it says it in a passive voice, and it does say it in the Hebrew via views, and they brought, and it doesn't say the people. So it could have said via vihu ha'am, and the people brought, but it's in the passive voice.
But they means the people.
Yeah, they and they brought, but who is the they? And it doesn't say who they are, but as we reconstruct the scene, it is clearly whoever was around brought it. And it will become a little clearer as we read on when the law is described. I want, David.
The first terms of this story are mixed parentage. And I keep thinking or asking myself, what does mixed parentage contribute to this unknown blasphemy?
Right. And I think that is the response I would bring up to your point, Steve. It's the fact that it's a son of an Egyptian and a son of Israelite. Do the same laws apply? Is this person then to be judged by Israelite laws?
But if he's living in the Israelite camp, doesn't that kind of determine what law applies?
Well, if a Christian walks into a synagogue and doesn't follow something, do we hold the Christian responsible for knowing what the rest of us know? No, you are having dinner with your Christian friend and they order lobster. Are they violating the law or not? Are they bound by kashrut? And in our world today would say they're not committing a sin because it doesn't apply to them. So one possible reason why they're not sure, and that's both to Steve and David, or whoever raised it, maybe it was Howard, the fact that the person is a son of Egyptian seems to be why they bring it up. They're not sure whether this child son is bound by the 10 Commandments. Was he given 10 Commandments in Sinai, even though he's in the camp? So you might say, yeah, if he murdered someone, you would certainly judge him by Israelite law. But is this the same? If this person is disrespectful to Israel's God?
I want to drink the water too.
So I would imagine that is a thing. Now, there is one question, there are questions in chats. I didn't check the chat. Do we have a name? We typically don't admit, oh, that's something else. Yeah, right. Moses will give the report.
Rabbi,
So the
Rabbi,
oh yeah, please.
Rabbi, I think one of the things that we would want to know is who started this fight. And that is completely glossed over. It seems to be irrelevant. But from our perspective, that would be an important factor.
Yeah. And the rabbis, I will share with you some of the things the rabbis do, because they are puzzled by some of those things. And their answers are kind of weird too, actually. But they're trying to answer some of our questions. Rebecca.
My question is, at this point in time, would the son have patrilineal obligations versus matrilineal?
Yes, that's one of the questions that we get to ponder here. Where does he belong? Is he regarded as Israelite because his mother is? Or is he an outsider? Here's a question that hadn't come up, but I would have expected to be a surprise. This is somebody in the Israelite camp, and they're intermarried, right? But they're part of the camp. They live as part of the Israelite community. Does the text seem to find it annoying or suspicious or critical? Doesn't seem to, I mean, it looks at the fact that the guy is Egyptian, has Egyptian father and Israelite woman, but we have an intermarriage story, and the intermarriage issue is not the issue. The address, no one says, oh, this child doesn't belong here. They seem to be comfortable with this marriage. It's not raising any eyebrows. And for some people today, it would raise an eyebrow. So we have all those questions. Yeah, Merle.
Is the discomfort with the fact that it's an intermarriage, or with the fact that they have a son who they have to establish how he fits into this intermarriage? Is it matrilineal or patrilineal descent? And the other, I mean, they obviously allowed this couple to live in the community, even though they're intermarried. So what's their feeling on intermarriage?
Right. That's a question out there for us. Very good, Howard. We're going to start putting things together soon.
Yeah, okay. It seems to me perhaps that since they didn't mention the name of the father, and I don't think it's that likely that an Egyptian would necessarily move into a Hebrew community, that this was a single mother. The father is nowhere in sight.
That could be too, right?
They're married. Doesn't say they were married or that the father was present.
That good point. You're right. And why is she named when nobody's named?
He's not named, right?
He's not named, but she is. What is about her name that's so important, and her tribe and all of that? Well, the big answer to all those questions is that those are uncertainties in the text, and interpreters, beginning with the rabbis, try to answer them. Here's what the rabbis say about Shlomit, the mother. And that ties in with what you said, Howard. They said she is named, the only one named from the daughters of Israel, because she alone was a whore. Now, that's definitely not in the text, but it is their way of condemning the intermarriage in a way that the text doesn't really do. The other thing they say, and someone raised it, what was the cause of the fight? And it had to do with a matter of halakha. They argued about a particular halakha. So, I'm reading a fight between two young men. They're not boys, they're men. Because if they were boys, it would be different. What did the one man say that was so horrible? The Hebrew is kind of peculiar. It uses a word that has a wide range. In verse 11, Vayikov ben haisha Yisraelit et Hashem vayekalel. The son of the Israelite woman, Vayikov. Vayikov means to pierce or to make something permanent or to inscribe. And it's a way of establishing something with certainty and permanence. So it's as if it's either he pronounced the name with a kind of force and then cursed using God's name. And my guess, he said something like, and don't bring me before God, but he may have said something like God damn it, something like that, which for many people, even today, is a horrible curse, because you're using God to use a curse. And he would have named God's name when he said that. So it's blasphemy in that sense, using God's name, not only in vain, but for a curse. And the question is he bound by an Israelite law, or is he not bound by an Israel law? And the answer is in what comes next. So let's read it. I need the reader to read verse 13 following. Go ahead, Natalie.
And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the blasphemer outside the camp, and let all who are within hearing lay their hands upon his head, and let the whole community stone him.
Okay, so it takes us back to the point that was raised. Who were the ones who brought it? And now it's saying anyone who was there and heard this, in some ways they are tainted by having been in the presence where God's name has been defiled or profaned. And therefore, they need to do something special to exonerate, to be somehow cleansed of their role as passive hearers. And then all the community has to stone him. Now, we have to assume that the people are to put their hands on it and move away. They're not going to be there when the stoning is going on. But again, we don't know. Bizarre scene. And then we have the laws that come out of it. You want to keep reading, Natalie?
Okay, and to the Israelite people speak thus. Anyone who blasphemes his God shall bear his guilt. If he also pronounces the name of God, he shall be put to death. The whole community shall stone him, stranger or citizen. If he has thus pronounced the name, he shall be put to death.
Yeah, so they don't solve the identity, But we know from the solution that they want to affect anyone, whether an insider or outsider, who curses God, who is in the community, who is going to be killed. So those laws make sense. But then we have a whole bunch of laws and that continue, and for the sake of time, because I want to get back to the two stories, I'm going to skip some of it, but some of them have nothing to do with the situation. The most striking one is verse 20, which says, fracture for fracture, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Well, we didn't have a case of eye for an eye. This is not a case. So why is that law here? And then the last verse from God's word, very important. You shall have one standard for stranger and citizen alike, for I Adonai am your God. Okay? So
may I say a little something? You know, as we read this now, at this point in time, this is quite horrible. However, is this all these stories at this time told? Because how are you going to make a people believe in a God that they cannot see, they cannot touch, they cannot anything? It doesn't exist. And if you are trying to make people believe this God at that period of time, it's only fear that you put into people, fear that something horrible is going to happen to you if you do not follow these rules. And I'd just like to hear what you have to say about that, because that's related to a lot of the beginnings of when they kill those children because they took the pan or did something wrong with the pan. These are horrible things the way we see it today. How would you say that all of this is written and told because of trying to teach this God to people who don't see this God?
Yeah. And I think that's a very important point. It's highlighting respect for God, who cannot be seen and whom you don't have on your shelf so you can talk to. So reverence is, fear or reverence are issues that are very important in both these stories. So we know one solution for the story is an outsider or an insider, if they dishonor God in the camp, in the community. So if a Christian comes into a synagogue and utters something vile about God, the community has responsibility to do something about it. You don't let it go. I think that's what's implied here. Now, Natalie, you did the perfect segue for what I want to do next. The two stories. These are the only two stories, and they seem to be a frame. What do they have in common? You already pointed out. They have dishonoring God in some way, violating God's sanctity. Because notice the laws end, for I Adonai am your God. It's God's honor that's at stake in both stories. But what other relationship might we see? And maybe not parallel, but maybe reversal. What other things might be going on for having those two stories frame this? Steve.
It seems to me that it starts out with people who are essentially royals being held to a high standard and being punished. And then you go through all the laws in the middle of the book, and then you come and say, these laws really apply to everybody, and it doesn't matter how lowly you are, or even if you're 100% part of our community, you get treated the same way.
Yeah.
The laws are for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. So it goes from the highest, most noble, holiest family, the priestly high priest family, and it ends by looking at, we might say, the marginal, somebody who's partly outsider. The tribe of Dan, a small tribe, not a major tribe, not from Judah or Menashe, the big tribes, but it's from one side of the social pyramid to the other. I'm going to put a word in the chat that may be familiar to some of you. The word is merismus, a nice Latin word. As my teacher used to say, it's a 25-cent word to impress friends with. It really a concept of from A to Z, from alpha to omega. Those are merismus. It means you list the first and you list the last, and everything in between is included. So when we say from alpha to omega, from A to Z, that's what we mean, right? A, B, C, D, everything. So those two stories create a merismus. Everything from reverence from the top to the lowest bottom, who's still a member of the society, okay? That seems to be part of it. And in both cases, it's about the sons who are doing the violation. And I'm not sure what to do about that, too. Do you have any thoughts? In both stories, it's the sons who are implicated. So it's a story about sons. Any idea why sons? I don't know the answer. This is just starting that you have two stories about sons misbehaving. Merle.
Women aren't yet respected, or women aren't, I shouldn't say it that way. Women are not, people don't look at women doing anything that would be blasphemous.
Oh.
But they may already have, and it's just not noticeable. But I have a question about all of these stories. I mean, this one happens to be about a Jewish woman and a non-Jewish man. But we have plenty of people who are all Jewish who walk into synagogues and create havoc of some kind. My experience of being in Jewish communal service for 40-something years. So how does it apply to them? I'm looking at it from the perspective that it's not just non-Jewish men that might create these issues.
Yeah, but I think the assumption is, even though it's not in practice, is that if it's a Jewish person is bound by the laws of the community. The question is, and is an outsider bound by the laws of the community? Do you hold them accountable? And in this case, when it comes to defaming God, the laws are very clear. Insider or outsider, you have to be held accountable. Brad, and then we probably need to bring it, and Donna, and then we'll bring it to a close.
Yeah, Rabbi, you began by talking about the similarities between these two stories in terms of the there's so much that we don't know, but we know a lot more in this story than in the other story.
Yes.
As to why they're being punished.
Yes.
That's point number one. But point number two, and I'm going off in a different direction, is that where this eventually leads is a journalist at Charlie Hebdo in France being massacred a number of years ago for printing a cartoon of Muhammad, which was deemed to be blasphemous.
Yeah.
So here's a perfect justification for those murders, and how are we to deal with that today in our lives?
Well, the one thing about the case was that it's not part of Jewish law, and in Jewish law, capital punishment is pretty much eased out. Although we know in places in Jerusalem and neighborhood where stones are being thrown at people who, including children, right, who seem to be desecrating Judaism by riding in shorts or on the Shabbat. So I think most of us moved away from taking that kind of position, but the Bible does sanction death penalty for things we wouldn't dream of sanctioning. And that's where interpretation and halakha and realities come in. And over the millennia, we don't do it. You know, we haven't seen many stoning to death in Jewish circles. Also, we know that there are people who would. And we do have extremist fanatics, but especially as liberal Reform Jews, we use common sense and we use different laws, and things don't apply. But it is a legacy that is thrown at us time and time again. Look, the Bible sanctions violence. And it does sanction controlled violence. We can't get away from it. There are things that I wish weren't there. But there are also other things that it sanctions: reverence for life and reverence for God, and reverence, we read last week, love your neighbor, love the stranger, because I'm God. So responsibility, it's a question, and someone said it at the beginning, and then I'll shut up, how to create a community where people are responsible, and you have all kinds of guardrails that you try to put in, and then you want to put something that will make those guardrails effective, not just words on the page, and fear is one of those guardrails. So their purpose is to prevent people from going around and committing crimes, not to, let me turn this off, not to go around and do these things, but to prevent them. And some of those laws are extreme. Donna, the last word. You're mute.
You had asked about why sons.
Yeah.
I think it's because the sons represent the next generation who's going to take over. They're going to be the ones who are going to be in charge of everything, and they need to know how to do it the right way.
Exactly.
So.
I think that's a perfect, in my mind, that makes a lot of sense. Why they're not just telling us about two leaders, but really sons. It's about continuity. And that's a good segue to bring this to, in conclusion, as we ourselves are the next generation of people who have come before us, and we remember them. And so I would like to move to the Kaddish list and start by, does anyone have someone whom you're remembering today and wish to share, either in the chat or say the name before I list the names who are a part of our community?
11.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Those who passed away during the past month: Jacqueline Besharat Anvar, Judith Gabriela Benvenisti, Diane Edelstein, Michael Edwards, Evelyn Eigler, Rabbi Julian Franklin Feingold, Molly Gold, Ruana Haas. I guess Molly is the mother of the person who has been helping us all along, and that's her mother. Ruana Haas, Jeffrey Kessler, Brian Kravitz, Tammy Leventhal, Karen Levy, Gloria Meyer, Max Shavtal, Hillel Silverman, Jean Weiss, Linda Wolf. Yahrzeit that occurred during the past week: Pauline Adler, Frank Albert, Louis Appelbaum, Aziz Arastuzadeh, Ruth Astor, Ida Barkan, Irene Bastheim, Dolph Baum, Rose Bauman, Victor Behar, Donald Burkus, Bert Blauner, Tony Block, Harold Blumenfeld, Harry Blumkin, Francis Bochenek, Tamar Bornstein, Jules Beauville, Richard Braumerman, Eli Broad, Frank Kastelman, John Katafo, Joseph Chizek, Mana Cohen, Theodore Copeland, Beatrice Curry, Irma Dool, Yetta Davidson, Bruce Arthur Devlin, Dorothy Ehrlich, Rabbi Morley Feinstein, Esther Feldman, Daniel Feldstein, Ben Fenton, Harry Finkel, Donald Fishman, Regina Fleischer, Louis Jean Foreman, Joan Friedman, Harry Gartzman, David Gelfand, Herbert Ginsburg, Nathan Kittling, Sonia Goland, Julius Goldberg, David Goldsmith, Florence Cecil Goodman, Erwin Greenwald, Lillian Harrison, Arthur Henry Heisler, Ralph Kalish, Alberta Shield Kalish, Ralph W. Kalish, Sidney Jason Keith, Norton Kirschenbaum, Selma Klein, or Klein maybe, Solomon Koketov, Aaron Kosmin, Milton Cover, John Kreiter, Erwin Colwyn, Lillian Kushenitsky, Solaska, Sidney Laxer, Eric Lessin, Jamshid Lolashi, Sam Miner, Beverly Miller, Jonathan Moore, Bernard Morgan, Fred Naidich, Nehemiah Naim, Leon Paris, Doris Preston, Madeline Malin Price, Stephen Rettinger, Louis Rogers, Ethel Roseman, Burton Rosen, Anna Rosen, Anna Schiff, Louis Schwimmer, Rose Schwimmer, Selma Cesar, Elias Silverstein, Aline Wild Speed, Louis Spiegelman, Harry Steinberg, Barbara Stephens, Sylvia Pankin-Sutkin, Elsie Teitelbaum, Florent Tiltzer, Sharon Tuman, Samuel Tush, Rhett Turner, Belle Verzi, Dorothy Walder, Nancy Weeks, Mickey Weiss, Ruth Wilkes, Barbara Weiss, David Wolf, Albert Slotnikin. Any other names? We also keep in our heart those who died in the defense of Israel and those who died in the defense of the United States, and all those who have no one to say Kaddish for them. So let's join and say the Kaddish together. Itgadal v'itkadosh shmei Rabbah, ve'alma tivra kirutei, ve'yamlich malchutei, b'chayachon u'b'yomechon, u'v'chayei b'chol bet Yisrael, b'agala u'v'zman kariv, ve'imru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach, לעולם עולמי עולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה. תוש בחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. May the one who makes peace in heaven make peace upon all of us, on all the house of Israel and on all the people of the world. And let us say amen.
Amen.
I hope
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom,
Thank you.
everyone.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shalom.